setting the agenda first, which means that we need to decide what we're going to talk about first. We're going to set the first 2 agenda items, so that out of the 4, we're going to set the first 2. So the first topic is nuclear proliferation in North Korea. The second one is the Syria issue. The third one is escalation in the Ukraine. And the fourth is civil war in South Sudan. United States, you have 1 minute to discuss how you would like to set the agenda.
The 2 major topics within this debate that pose a greatest threat to all of the nations here are number 1, the crisis in Ukraine, and number 2, the Islamic State. First of all, the crisis in Ukraine not only affects the security of the Ukraine, NATO, and the United States, but it affects the ideals of self-determination and sovereignty upon which the United Nations was founded.
All delegates in favor of this agenda, please raise your placards now. And with a vote of 10 to 5, this motion passes.
The delegate of France strongly believes that this council should be concerned with making sure that the Minsk agreement is implemented. Furthermore, for peace and stability to return to the Ukraine and to the Ukrainian region, there must be a decentralization of the government in Ukraine, and that there should be greater autonomy for the regions that have tried to rebel against the central Ukrainian government.
We are currently a world of modern diplomacy where conflicts shouldn't be dealt with through military means, but rather through diplomatic means. And the United States stresses that the only way that we can come to an agreement on this is the disarmament of both sides.
The Russian Federation would like to stress that the government of Ukraine is not the real Ukrainian government, and we should not recognize them as such.
So far, they have simply stated that they will not recognize Ukraine as a nation, but that clearly cannot happen in order for us to have a substantive debate.
And if Viktor Yanukovych was reinstated as the true president of the Ukraine, then we would be willing to compromise.
We can legitimize a state while still questioning the legitimacy of the standing government. We do not have to like or support the government that's currently in power, but we can still recognize that a state is legitimate and that it deserves the sovereignty that all nation states deserve under the UN Charter.
All those opposed? We are now in a 7-minute unmoderated caucus.
It as a sovereign nation, which is necessary for this debate, then we need to demilitarize the area.
Asking the people, do they wish to be a part of Russia or do they wish to be a part of Ukraine, is an integral point to this negotiation.
We must realize that there is a section of the Ukrainian population that does feel like they are being alienated.
This working paper that we are working on calls for a ceasefire between all parties involved, because Egypt believes that a ceasefire will help with the negotiations here in the UN Security Council, as well as negotiations between the people of the victims of the crisis itself.
We got to understand that Ukraine is in a bad spot right now. There is danger to the common civilian, and that needs to be addressed.
We would like to propose that the vote in Crimea does not occur until Russia agrees and pulls out their weapons. And second of all, humanitarian aid will not come to Ukraine until they disarm and stand down their forces. That way, that both sides will have an incentive to agree to the ceasefire.
Policy of dialogue between the two sides of pro-Ukrainian forces and pro-Russian rebels should be encouraged by this council.
The reason that the rebels are there are because they feel like the Ukrainian government is not representing them, and they feel that they have no political voice. But by giving them this referendum, we are giving them a political voice.
And if Ukraine does not engage in the disarmament of troops alongside the disarmament of the Russian Federation, there will be a decrease in humanitarian aid directed towards the Ukrainian government. This will not only incentivize the Ukrainian government to fulfill the agreement, but also it fulfills the Russian Federation interest.
Now, as of yesterday, the right sector seized a sizable portion of the region of Luhansk that was controlled by the Ukrainian government. They seized this basically by taking control of checkpoints, seizing arsenals belonging to the Ukrainian army, as well as kidnapping the general in charge of the Luhansk offensive. They will basically try to seize control of all of eastern Ukraine. While this has been unfolding, the Russian Federation has been making progress. They have seized pro-Russian or separatist rebels in the eastern part of Ukraine, in the region that they call Donbass, which have decided to advance on the Ukrainian army, which has been forced to retreat. Any questions? All right, seeing none, take it away.
The referendum date, if the rebels are planning to hold it in 2 weeks, I don't think they'd be amenable to having it 6 months out. So I think we definitely need to move that to, at the very least, 2 months away from today's date.
No unbiased referendum can be held in the near future during or even slightly after an invasion, as the influence of those troops and the invading force will be extreme.
I find it quite ironic that the Russian Federation says they will respect the sovereignty of the nation of Ukraine and that they should work out their own problems when they are the root of that problem.
We still believe that the cause of this violence is Ukraine's disregard for their mostly Russian citizens, which means we should still have the referendum, which could stop the rebels from continuing their fight in the Ukraine.
The fact that the referendum could be biased. To resolve that, if we simply have voting booths be anonymous, then the bias is gone. People can still vote how they want to without fear of being persecuted or anything like that.
So we will now vote on Directive 1.1.
Yes.
Malaysia votes yes.
New Zealand votes yes.
Russia votes yes.
Senegal votes yes.
With a unanimous vote, this directive passes.
Also, having it be 2 months away, I find is a very good compromise between what the rebel groups want and what we originally proposed, which was 6 months away.
No one's going to go to vote when there's still shooting going on around them. I think the priority is just to first put the Ukrainian citizens first and have safety in that area before there's any type of motion to vote.
Their experiences with powers above them have been really, really horrible and corrupt. Therefore, an anonymous referendum could easily be swayed by rebels threatening voters.
This is a prime concern for Ukrainians. We are currently a war zone, and as much as you guys want to be the heroes and defenders of democracy, our country is kind of the playground for Russia and the rebels.
Please do not refer to the rebels as our rebels. They are not in any association with the Russian government. They are just Russian rebels.
The best pathway towards a legitimate vote is not through the oversight of a Russian rebel group, but rather through the oversight of an international body, such as the United Nations.
The fact is, a referendum is going to happen whether we sponsor one or not in 2 weeks, and we need to take that into account. We can't say that these rebels are going to be amenable to ours 6 months down the line when we handle the rebels. Clearly, that's not going to be in their interest, and clearly they're going to hold that referendum in 2 weeks if we try to move forward with that course of action.
No one can actually control the voting system when there are 2 or 3 parties fighting each other actively.
And if they don't comply with these diplomatic talks, what are we going to do? Are we going to let them create a sovereign state within Ukraine? No, we cannot let them do that. We have to intervene militarily, and frankly, this is our only option. It might not be the best, but it is our only option.
We're not talking about whether or not we support Bashar al-Assad. We are talking about the Islamic State. So we do not need to throw our support in favor of Bashar al-Assad because he has obviously used weapons of mass destruction in the past.
The government of Bashar al-Assad and their alliance with Russia not only hampers cooperation in Syria and Iraq, but it also is against international law in some cases and human rights.
We've seen this time and time again in the Middle East. Power vacuums lead to more violence, and so if we take down this leader, what are we going to lead to? More violence. We're going to give ISIL a chance to rise up and become even stronger, and frankly, this is our only rational path of action.
If somebody wants to make an airstrike on ISIS, there should not be limitations when doing so.
It just kills more people, and it just creates another tool for ISIS to use as propaganda to recruit more fighters.
No war is perfect. That's the nature of war. That's the way it is.
We can't just bomb them out of existence because terrorist groups even if you bomb them and still survive, you need to deal with how they are recruiting people and how they are making money.
So ISIS doesn't have any ties with countries itself in selling oil, but it is going through Turkey. And this is why it's very important for this committee to recognize that securing the border of Turkey is very important for this because A, it provides better protection for those living in Turkey and in the European states, as well as it does not allow ISIS to transport oil and sell oil across the border.
I would also like to add that a majority of the profits being made by ISIS, by the Islamic State's sale of oil is not through international markets, such as through buyers in Turkey, but rather through buyers in northern Syria.
Much of ISIS's money gains are also through taxing the people who are living under ISIS control.
Venezuela believes that we need to create a coalition of Muslim-led countries as well as Muslim leadership organizations who can work with socio-psychologists to start understanding what conditions allow for the propagation of terrorist beliefs and how we can stop these things from happening in the future so that, as was brought up by Ukraine, when ISIS does fall, we can make sure that something like this does not happen again.
Essentially invade Iraq for the sake, then they're just going to leave, and then it leaves a void.
You can't support Iraq and support the Kurds.
United States, Ukraine. Delegate of France, you have the floor for 1 minute.
Thank you. Simply supporting Bashar al-Assad, one autocratic leader, would not help that problem. Sure, it may give stability to Syria for a short period of time, but at what cost?
30-second speaking time to discuss solutions to ISIS. Please raise your pockets now if you're in favor. All those opposed? This motion passes.
The Iraqi government and the Iraqi army, as I stated yesterday, have actually been leaving equipment on the field, on the battlefield, and running away. So they're maybe not the best choice for who we support.
Stability is the way we can move forward without having groups such as ISIS gaining control. And so we must do whatever we can to stop ISIS, and that must be supporting Bashar al-Assad, because that is the only way we can move forward.
Sanctions only serve to destabilize them further.
It's quite concerning to the Russian Federation that any nation here would not want to at least make sure and verify that the claims made by Turkey are true, and to make sure that their ally is not in fact a terrorist nation.
Would your country be willing to allow an international group to conduct an investigation within your borders about something that another country has accused you of?
We are a very transparent country. We have nothing to hide. We would be fine with that. There shouldn't really be any reason why Turkey would be opposed to an investigation if they truly are not supporting ISIS.
The Kurdish government in the northern part of Iraq have announced that they will hold a referendum to separate from Iraq and basically achieve independence in February of 2017.
Subpoint I, specifically education on fallacies portrayed by terror groups such as ISIS and others in the Middle East. This education would be conducted by Middle Eastern countries and be supervised by the UN.
Do delegates wish to ask any questions?
Securing the borders around refugee camps and the nations affected by ISIS. So, does this clause refer to national borders or refugee camps?
It refers to the borders around refugee camps.
It's in our best interest as the UN to promote the peace and security of these individuals that are refugees and are displaced victims.
This working paper is focused on giving each individual nation the ability to personalize plans that will work best to combat terror within their borders.
We believe that it is also imperative to act militarily on the issue. Not only is it important to provide humanitarian aid, but the security of the Iraqi government is essential to solving this crisis.
But this is a more, I'd say, passive approach rather than directly funding governments or directly attacking ISIS. This is about fighting something at its root, and so that is a separate issue.
All those in favor of voting yes on working paper 2.1 presented by Egypt, Uruguay, New Zealand, Japan, and Venezuela, please raise your placards now. 14-0 to 1, this passes. We're now going to vote on Resolution 2.3. All those in favor of Resolution 2.3, please raise your placards high. All those opposed? And with a vote of 10 to 1 to 4, this passes.
This is our closing ceremony for a small conference.
We basically tried to roll out crises that would test your positions and perhaps show why value systems sometimes can be extremely relative, and I hope you experienced that. And this is the point of LCM. We believe that young people can do amazing things once they set their minds to it. We do believe that you need sovereignty, independence, and freedom in order to become adults, which is why we try to treat you as such. And with that, thank you very much, Dean Delegates. Have a wonderful rest of your election cycle.